The mayor just recently had a fundraiser that was held in a wine cave full of crystals and served $900 a bottle wine.
I am literally the only person on this stage who's not a millionaire or a billionaire. So if this is important, this is the problem with issuing purity tests you cannot yourself pass.
So while you can dismiss committee hearings, I think this experience works. And I have not denigrated your experience as a local official. I have been one.
You actually did denigrate my experience, Senator, and it was before the break, and I was going to let it go because we got bigger fish to fry here. But you implied
I don't think we have bigger fish to fry than picking a president of the United States.
Mayor Pete Buttigieg getting the front-runner treatment at this week's final Democratic debate of 2019. So let's bring in the Powerhouse Roundtable, ABC senior national correspondent Terry Moran, NPR White House reporter Aisha Roscoe, ABC News political analyst Matthew Dowd, and Washington Post political columnist Karen Tumulty. Great to see you all on this pre-holiday weekend. But Terry, I want to start with you, and I want to go back to that Senate trial. You heard what Senator Jones said, what Senator Johnson. They're still at an impasse, clearly. So we're going to ask you to read the tea leaves. You've been through an impeachment proceeding before. So what do you see? How do you see this trial proceeding?
Mitch McConnell calls the shots. At the end of the day, the Senate has the sole power to try impeachments. He's in control of the Senate. I think he will, because he is an institutionalist to some degree, he'll try to work with Democrats. But at the end of the day, the rules of this trial will be laid down by Mitch McConnell. I cannot figure out what the strategy Nancy Pelosi has. The Constitution says the House has the power, the sole power to bring an impeachment. The Senate has the sole power to try an impeachment. I don't get what her leverage is here. And I think at the end of the day, the Democrats are going to come up short because they don't have the votes in the Senate, and that's what controls the process.
And is there an argument? I know Noah Feldman, who testified in the House impeachment proceedings, said he actually hasn't been impeached yet because those articles aren't sent up, which probably will be moot pretty soon.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It'll be moot because eventually they'll get it. And he says that the House must transfer the actual articles to the Senate for the impeachment to happen. It looks to me like they impeached him. They voted on an bill of impeachment with 2 articles. That's an impeachment.
A little distraction for a while. And Karen, let me read what you wrote this week in your Washington Post column. If things play out as they usually do in the Trump era, all of this will soon be subsumed in the next thermonuclear blast of chaos generated by a president who cannot be chastened or shamed. Once again, the House has made a notch in history. What's different this time, however, is that no one really believes anything will change as a result. So is there anything the Democrats can do?
I think everything is frozen in place right now until Congress gets back. But I agree with Terry. The chances of getting any kind of concessions out of Mitch McConnell are very small, and the risks of delaying this are quite high for 2 reasons. One is that it undercuts the House's argument that they had to move quickly on impeachment because it was so urgent. And the second is that it is depriving their presidential candidates of any oxygen. And the fact is, if Donald Trump is going to be removed from office, it is going to happen next November.
And Aisha, I suspect you will agree with Terry and Karen, but the Democrats really don't have much leverage here.
They don't have much leverage. I think that what they may be doing is, this is a holiday week right now. I don't know that it really matters if they didn't transmit the articles immediately, but it does satisfy a part of Pelosi's base who were kind of calling out to like maybe try to use this to get some leverage. And it makes President Trump twist a bit. I mean, talking to people at the White House, they were saying that the very same things that people are bringing up now. How does this work for Nancy Pelosi? If this is so urgent, why isn't she sending them over? This is politics. But then you have President Trump going out and tweeting, I want my trial immediately. And so you may be getting that. You're making him twist a bit, and he wants it to go to the Senate immediately. He wants to get what he views as his vindication. So I don't know that you're losing that much by delaying it. Now, if they delayed it for months or for a very long time, that's a whole different thing.
I can't imagine that's going to happen. And Matt, let's look at the latest ABC News Washington Post poll out this week on on impeachment. 71% of voters said the president should let his aides testify in the Senate trial, including the majority of all Democrats, Republicans, independents. Will that really make a difference when you look at the Hill?
Well, first, as they say back in Texas, Merry Christmas, y'all, and Happy Holidays.
Merry Christmas, y'all. I've always wanted to say that, so there we go.
Perfect.
Thank
We
you.
got it now down. First, I want to say something about, I don't underestimate Nancy Pelosi's ability anymore in this process and what she's able to do. She's proven it over 20 years. She's like the Bill Belichick of the House chamber. She knows what she's doing. I agree we're in suspended animation for 2 weeks. There's no real delay. They're going to come back on January 7th. I think she understands she's going to have to send the articles over. The question only becomes, is there 4 Republican senators that are willing to vote to make it go to a trial and have witnesses, a real trial? I think that's doubtful, because what they would then be voting is, they'd be voting to make it harder for them to then take the next vote, because more evidence would be gathered in this. I think the public has a consensus in part on some of this, and they're split on another part of this. They have a consensus is the broad public thinks the president did something wrong. The broad public thinks the president needs to be held accountable, and the broad public thinks the Senate should hold a real trial with witnesses. Where they're divided is what the results should be. Should the president be removed from office? Where it's fundamentally split, and it shows the polarized divide in our country. But there is a sense in the country that the president did something wrong, and in some way he should be held accountable.
And Terry, this is the second impeachment trial you have covered, or not trial, proceedings. You were President Clinton back then. As Matt pointed out, as we all know, all along partisan lines, this one. So just give us some thoughts on the difference between the two and what it says about where the country is now.
The most striking thing in that poll is that while this is a historic moment, it doesn't feel momentous. And that poll said that only 62% of Americans say they are following these developments closely. Whereas in the Clinton administration, 82%, 2/5 of the country can't be bothered. And part of that is exhaustion with the constant drumbeat of outrage and bitterness and rancors, all that stuff. And I think that people are just tuning it out a little bit. It just doesn't feel as much. And without getting the country, interested, much less actually behind the process, we are split on that, it really feels like a nothing burger to some extent.
And Karen, you have also, I think you were been in the chamber for both of those. Is it a combination of that, and also it's Donald Trump, and he's telling people it doesn't matter, doesn't feel like we've been impeached? The people I talked to out on the road, they just want it over with as well.
As much as I was in the chamber in '98, and I was in the chamber this week as well, and it did feel momentous and historic in '98, and everyone said it was historic Wednesday, but the fact is, it just felt like another Wednesday on Capitol Hill. Two sides just sort of talking past each other. Unlike in '98, none of the president's own party was actually saying there was anything wrong with anything that he had done. And finally, there was nobody looking beyond this and saying, we've got to sort of heal as a country. We've got to figure out some way to bring together, as Dick Gephardt in '98, the Democratic leader, argued so passionately. The assumption here was, we're at war with each other, and we're just going to stay at war with each other.
And I think there also is another fundamental difference between '98 and now, which I think is problematic for the president. And then everybody likes to compare the two and what happened with Bill Clinton. On the day Bill Clinton was impeached, he had a 73% job approval rating. On the day Donald Trump was impeached, he had a 43% job approval rating. That is 30 points lower in the midst of this. And so I think that's a fundamental difference as we head into an election year, into 2020, and what's going to happen in this. But I agree, it's almost as if the assumption now is everybody is political. So it doesn't matter what the substance is. It doesn't matter what's really going on. We're all going to make political calculations. And I think if anybody wants an answer about why Donald Trump got elected president, is because we've ended up in this sort of political gamesmanship in reality TV where nobody pauses and stops and says, quit making political calculations. What's the substance and depth of this issue?
And Aisha, let's turn to Donald Trump himself on this. You saw that scathing letter to Nancy Pelosi. We saw him at that rally making horrible comments about John Dingell, saying he was maybe looking up from hell. What does it say about where his head is in this? I mean, this is a permanent stain on his record. He has impeached next to his name now.
And I think while there may be this sense in the general public that this is just Donald Trump, this is another thing that he's going through, I think that this really matters to Donald Trump. And this really matters to President Trump. And because he's always concerned about his legacy, he wants to be the best president there ever has been. And now he's an impeached president. And so that is something that will follow him. And I think that you saw that in that 6-page letter this week that was deeply personal against Nancy Pelosi. I mean, the third paragraph is talking about, you say you're praying for me, you know that's not true, and you're going to have to live with that. I mean, that's what he was bringing out this week. And some of it is just anger when he's talking about John Dingell and all of this. Like, he is ratcheting up his rhetoric, and he's been doing that for months. So I think that even though this may be something where the general public and everyone feels like this is just business as usual, I think this matters to President Trump, and it matters to his behavior and what happens after that.
And Terry, I want to turn to something else that happened to President Trump this week, and that is in an editorial in Christianity Today, calling Trump grossly immoral and saying he should be removed from office. That drew a strong reaction from President Trump as well. But he has largely been embraced by evangelicals. Does that change? And what does it say about the evangelical community if they move on from this, too?
It says that they are rock solid behind President Trump and that they see in him, for all of his flaws as a man, a warrior for their cause. Many evangelicals feel under pressure from a secular society and a changing America that actually threatens, many of them believe, their way of life. And this implacable, brutish force that is in the White House is their guy. And I don't think an editorial in Christianity Today is going to change that, although I do think that the voice of the Christian progressive left is one that needs to be heard more. It's out there, but I don't see it budging evangelical support at all.
If a person of faith, anybody ought to read this editorial, because they basically took, if you take the quotes that they wrote of the editorial about Bill Clinton, about we need a president of morality, we need a president of character, all of which everybody that supports Donald Trump celebrated their stand when they made that stand. And keep in mind, Christianity Today is not some liberal progressive magazine. It's fairly conservative. They're very vehemently anti-choice. They're very vehemently pro-marriage and anti-sexual union. And so I think people should read that. And I think people, at some point in time, and we have to make a distinction. It's not evangelicals. It's white evangelicals, because there's a large segment of evangelical population that's black or Latino or some other that is vehemently opposed to prejudice. It's white evangelicals.
Okay, I want to move to the 2020 race. And Karen, what you saw in the debate on Thursday night, we saw that just a few minutes ago, target Pete Buttigieg. What does that tell you about where the race is right now?
Yeah, it was sort of his welcome to the NFL moment. It was everyone acknowledging that he has earned his front-runner status. He's the most surprising story, I think, of this entire election season. But I was struck that he was ready for it. I think he probably got the better of Elizabeth Warren in that exchange over wine caves and Swarovski crystals.
After we all looked up what a wine cave was. Yes.
Yes. We have a beer cave in my kitchen. We call it the refrigerator. But yes, this idea that he's some sort of elite candidate.
Coming back with the thing that he was the only one who wasn't a millionaire on stage.
Right, exactly.
And what about Vice President Biden? Ayesha, key analysts say had a really strong performance.
He did. I mean, he was sharp. He was answering the questions, and he didn't have any really big gaffes, which is a big issue for him. I think the thing with former Vice President Biden is that he's not necessarily consistent, right? The reason why this debate was good for him was because he showed that he can get through a debate and not make any big mistakes, but it's hit or miss with him because the other debates, you don't know which Joe Biden's going to show up.
He's running for president.
Does it matter? Do you think these debates really change people's minds? I mean, if you think back a few debates ago, what happened then? Are people thinking about that, or is it every debate matters. It's the most recent, and
people,
that's all they'll remember.
I think people are getting to know the candidates, and Biden's ability to get through the debate is one thing they'll put on the scale. I'm a Chicago Bears fan. Our quarterback, Mitch Trubisky's been terrible.
Which we all know.
Every time he throws a pass, you kind of, is he going to make it through? You don't want to be that guy running for president. And in this case, I think what people are looking for is solidity. Although one thing that Biden has shown is his polls are sticky high. People are also not as far left as Twitter Democrats or the base. I mean, obviously Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are very, very strong. But here's a candidate flawed, has had trouble. He remains sticky high in the polls.
And the question, though, becomes for him, and I do agree, I think debates matter. One doesn't matter. You can get a rise out of one, but if you don't have something to move on from it and keep going, Kamala Harris had a great debate. She rose, and then she didn't seem to have something to stick with it. Pete Buttigieg, is the reason why Pete Buttigieg is part of the conversation is debate performance primarily, his debate performances. I think this race, Joe Biden has a very solid 30% of the vote across the country. The question becomes, is if Joe Biden loses Iowa and loses New Hampshire, how sticky is that number when he heads to Nevada and he heads to South Carolina? Because that's the real question mark. Keep in mind, in 2004, Howard Dean was ahead in the polls right now.
What made you think of John Dean?
As we move from impeachment. Howard Dean was ahead, and John Kerry was seventh, who ended up winning the nomination. The same was true in 1976. Nobody heard of Jimmy Carter in 1976. In December of 1975, he ends up being the Democratic nominee. A lot can still change, but Joe Biden has a problem in New Hampshire and Iowa right now.
And one more place where a debate has mattered is to Elizabeth Warren, who got dinged for not being able to make the numbers on her health care plan add up in one debate, and I think she's still trying to recover from that.
And how about Amy Klobuchar? I mean, she has had some very strong debates, yet still doesn't seem to break out of that pack.
I think that for Amy Klobuchar, I think that debate night was a great night for her, and it was a great night for her to set herself apart. And she is a bit on the rise. I mean, she still has a ways to go, but this is the point when you want to start making your mark. She's kind of hitting her mark at a point where it could matter and it could make a difference.
Yeah, she's the Goldilocks candidate.
I think she has potential to surprise.
Candidate.
Terry, we got about 15 seconds. Do issues matter? I heard people talk about issues, and it was health care.
Yes, absolutely. The Democrats' issue in a good economy is going to be health care, if that's what they run on. And the biggest issue, though, for Democrats is they want to defeat Donald Trump. They'll look at who can sell the American public on the ability to make a difference in their lives. On health care is going to be their issue.
Heard a lot of that on the road as well. Thanks for all of you for being here. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to everybody.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.